The views expressed and opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Z-Talk Radio, its affiliates, or sponsors.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
Thank you for joining me in the House of Mystery. I'm your host, Al Warren. Tonight, we're going to talk about The Killer Nurse. We have Foxjohn, author, joining us to talk about his research and book about the Texan killer nurse that was injecting bleach into her dialysis patients. Right after these words.
Introducing the Starbucks Flat White. Crafted with 2 ristretto shots for bolder, caramelly espresso. Whole milk, steamed to a sweet, velvety microfoam. Delicately poured, so the espresso rises to the top. The perfect union of bold and sweet. Simplicity is its own artistry.
You can listen to us anytime, anywhere now. Download our free app now for the iPhone and iPad. Look for the Warren Exchange or House of Mystery app at the Apple App Store today.
Hey, Dr. Phil here. You know, I help people solve difficult problems every day, but one problem has me stumped: childhood hunger. Nearly 16 million children in America struggle with it. Luckily, the Feeding America network of local food banks collects surplus food, giving hope to hungry children and their families. But they need your help. Join me in supporting Feeding America and your local food bank at feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
The investigators say that Kim Sines injected up to 10 patients with bleach, 10 dialysis patients with bleach. 5 of them died as a result, Nancy. 5 others were injured. In one terrifying case, a witness says they actually saw this evil nurse apparently trying to get bleach into a syringe, looking around suspiciously to make sure nobody saw her, and then she injected it. This, according to 2 witnesses, injected it into 2 dialysis patients.
She started nursing in 2004, and here's the thing: this wasn't her first time at the rodeo, but she only worked at this facility, according to reports, for 8 months. And about 5 months prior to that, they started noticing a high level of patients started dying. 19 patients were found dead in the last 5 months this nurse worked there. It set off a whole bunch of red flags for authorities who closely monitored this facility. And it was during one of those times this facility was being monitored that not 1, but 2 patients sounded the alarm and noticed this nurse allegedly injecting bleach, raw bleach from a mop pail into the lines of the dialysis patients.
Just yesterday morning, they let me know you were gone. Suzanne, the plans they made put an end to you. I walked out this morning and I wrote down this song. I just can't remember who to send it to. I've seen fire and I've seen rain. I've seen sunny days that I thought would never end. I seen lonely times when I could not find a friend. But I always thought that I'd see you again.
Okay, we are back, and joining us now is author John Foxjohn. Thank you for joining us on the show.
Thanks for having me, Al.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Now, I guess you've been writing for quite a while. Let's start out with what's your history, but where did you come from before you were writing books?
Well, my biography used to say, been there, done that, because I really have. I quit high school when I was 17 and went in the Army during the Vietnam War and had no idea I was going to go to Vietnam. They, when I got there, when I went in, they were talking about the war was over and I was going to pull everybody out. So they asked for volunteers and basic training, and a couple of guys I started to get piling around with volunteers. So since it was over, I volunteered too. It wasn't over.
Mm.
Yeah, I was in the Army for 6 years and got out, and I was a police officer for 10. And the last 4, I was a homicide detective, and I've actually investigated over 300 homicides.
Wow.
And from there, I quit there because I'd promised my mother I'd go to college, and I couldn't do it at that time. Now police forces, they allow you to go to college and stuff. Then you just didn't have time, so I quit. I went to college, and I retired as a teacher and coach about 10 years ago, and I started writing, and it's taken off.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Like you've written quite a few books now. How many books have you written now?
I've written 14 fiction and 1 true crime.
Wow.
Well, I might say I published 14 fiction and 1 true crime. I've written a couple others that hadn't quite made the grade.
Well, that's okay. It's part of life. And so, what made you get into? Now, you wrote the true crime book. Now, the Killer Nurse is the one. Where did that come from? So, that was one of the cases that you were investigating.
No, what happened was I'd written a bunch of fiction, and which was doing really well. 4 of them were bestsellers, and this case here popped up in Lufkin, and where I live. And I looked at this, and it's I want to say this right, it's the most unique crime, or she's the most unique serial killer in history. And I'm sitting here, and I'm the only writer within, I don't know how many miles, a long way around. And it's happened right here in my hometown. And I'm sitting here thinking, I have to write this. But I didn't know how. So I spent 3 years learning how to write true crime and everything.
Wow. And so what about this case stuck up for you? Was it just because it was close?
No, it was because of the uniqueness of it. And as a homicide detective, I can't. All I knew was what was on the news. But I looked at, as a former homicide detective, and I looked at that and I said, "Good gracious, I wouldn't want to investigate this." Nobody in history. She was the first person in history that has ever been accused, charged, and convicted of murdering someone using bleach.
Yeah, that is different.
Yeah.
So what was the MO? Like, what did she do exactly?
She was a dialysis nurse at the DaVita Dialysis Center in Lufkin, and she was injecting bleach into the dialysis lines.
Wow. So that would kill the people, I guess, pretty instantly, or?
Yeah, it depends on how much they got. But bleach is deadly.
Yeah.
It is really, really deadly. And it's almost the perfect weapon.
And why do you say that?
What it does, when bleach hits the bloodstream, it immediately attaches itself to all the particles and all the components of red blood cells. And it causes hemolysis, which basically explodes the red blood cells. And it makes it look like a heart attack. All the potassium and stuff that's in the red blood cells goes out into the system and makes it look like a heart attack. And since it attaches to every form of the red blood cell, and because it causes hemolysis, the bleach almost totally disappears from the system. So
Wow.
if they start looking at it, they see a high concentration of potassium. And that happens a lot with heart attacks.
Wow. So now, was she a nurse for a really long time, or was she there for a long time?
She'd been working as a nurse at DaVita for 7 months when she was fired for killing patients. She had been a nurse for almost 2 years, time-wise, but she had already been fired from 5 other nursing jobs.
Wow, that's a lot of jobs in a short time.
Yeah, she didn't hold a job long. She went in, they hired her, and she lasted a week or so, and she was gone.
So was she just doing a bad job, or do you think she was doing this sort of thing with bleach and maybe other things on these other jobs?
I don't think she was doing this with bleach on the other jobs, but her first job was at Memorial Hospital in Lufkin, and she was there for a month, and she was let go, and nobody could find out why. The person who was over the records and everything had died, and they had no documentation. But her second job, she was at Woodland Heights Hospital in Lufkin, and she was caught stealing Demerol. And she was also caught giving patients pain medication that didn't need it.
Well, that could be a good thing.
Yeah. Maybe. But, that might have eventually led up to the injection of bleach, but I don't think she did that anyplace else.
So was there a reason that was she selecting certain people that she wanted to kill or do this to?
She was selecting certain people she wanted to do it to.
What was her reason then?
Okay. The DA and everyone, my reasoning kind of differs from the DA and everyone. They thought she was so miserable in her own life. She was just taking it out on patients. And I believe that's true, but I took it a step further. I looked at the type of patients she was murdering. Not just a patient, but what kind of patient they were. And to understand what I'm about to say here, you have to understand that dialysis patients, for the most part, are old, they're really ill, they're usually really cranky, and they're hard to get along with. They have to go to the dialysis center 3 days a week and have all their blood drawn out and put back in. And they're not easy to get along with. That wasn't the patients she was killing. She was killing the model patients, the ideal patients, the ones everybody liked. So I think she was killing the patients who wasn't as miserable as she was.
Wow. It doesn't seem like enough of a reason to kill them, but...
As much as some others.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
The problem with, you know, she pled not guilty.
Okay.
And the police interviewed her one time, and she was so high, she got so high then that they had to stop the interview. And they think she took something right before she started talking to them. But you could see it on tape. It just got progressively worse. She couldn't even hardly speak. And they finally just stopped the interview. But she went and got an attorney then, and that's the last anybody ever spoke to her. And you know, you never know the reason unless they tell you. But I think that's a pretty good guess.
Yeah. And so, how many people did she actually kill, or do we know?
She was convicted of killing 5 and trying to kill 3 others. She was charged with 5 and trying to kill 5 others, but she was found not guilty of 2 of those others. But I think she killed 19, at least 19.
Well, I guess we wouldn't know for sure. How was she caught then?
She was... Well, that's a long, convoluted story. The odds of a patient dying while they're being treated, actually in the chair being treated, you have to understand there's nurses there,
right?
There's doctors there, they're in a medical facility, they're right across the street from a hospital, their vitals are being monitored constantly. The odds of them dying while they're actually getting treatment are something like 1 in 240,000.
Wow.
On April the 1st, 2 patients died in Lufkin while being treated within 5 minutes of each other. And you can't calculate those odds. I mean, you can win the lottery 4 times before that actually, 4 or 5 times before that would actually happen again, you know. Yeah. And DaVita knew that something, from that, they knew that something was really, really wrong. So they brought in a whole bunch of monitors, team of monitors to look at it. And they looked at everything going on in that clinic except for employees doing it, because somebody injecting patients with bleach was so far-fetched that nobody could believe it. And 28 days later, after they came in, she had just separated from her husband. And I look back over the times that when these patients died, I took a little graph to when the patients died or when they were injured from bleach, and I looked at her lifetime line. And everything bad happened in her life at the time correlated to those patients dying. And she had her husband had just left her and was filing for divorce.
Probably,
and the next, go ahead.
I was going to say probably a good thing for him.
Yeah. He's the one who turned her in.
Oh.
But the next day, she went to work, and all she wanted to be was a medication nurse. She did not want to treat patients. She just wanted to handle the medicine. And she went into work, and she was supposed to handle the medicine. But a deal happened. An employee couldn't come in was sick or something. So they had to bring somebody else in. They brought somebody else in as a medication nurse. And she was going to have to take care of patients. And not only did her husband just leave her, but now they took the only job away from her that she wanted to do. And she was really angry. And she wasn't as careful. And 2 patients saw her inject 2 other patients with bleach. Actually saw her do it. And it scared them to death because she was their nurse that day.
Yeah, well.
And they flagged down another employee and told them. And, of course, the employee didn't really believe it. But the employee went and told one of the monitors who was there looking over everything, and she didn't believe it either. And she started talking to these 2 patients. And these 2 patients not only saw her do it, they saw where she put the syringes and several other things like that. And they got to checking, and every single thing that these 2 patients said they saw and she done, they found. And that was her downfall. They called in the police, and the police came there, and, of course, they've never had any dealings with anything like this. And they didn't believe her either. Then they got to investigating these patients and what these patients said they saw, and then they started believing it. And once they started, and that's what started the ball rolling.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most bizarre investigations and everything you'll ever see in your life.
Did she actually just take the bleach and inject it directly in, or did she
directly in?
Directly, and so.
Well, let me say, they had these little pans, little plastic pan containers that they used. They put bleach, a portion of bleach into some water, and they washed off the chairs with it. And what she did, she would pour the bleach into this water and inject it out of that and inject it into the dialysis lines. And that's why some of the patients lived.
Okay.
Because they didn't get a full dose of bleach.
Was there a reason she was mixing it with the water?
That's the way they normally do.
Oh, okay.
And she might have not been caught then, but it just so happened that the 2 patients who saw her were both ex-medical field workers. They had worked in the medical field before they got sick. And she did something. She set the container on the floor and poured the bleach into it. And that's what drew their attention. If she had just held it up and poured it in there, they'd have never thought anything about it. But the one rule you have in any kind of medical facility is you never put anything on the floor. Ever. That's what got their attention.
So how did they know how many she killed then? Like how could they go back, or how could they pin the people that had died on her?
They had a policy there that all deaths, anything suspicious, anything that happened, they took all the tubing and everything, all the equipment and everything. They put it in a bag, they marked the bags with the name and everything, and they put it in the refrigerator. And they did this on the 2 people that died on April the 1st, and everybody else since. And when the police came in, they had all of these bags of the tubing and everything that's used with the dialysis. The problem is, and here's one of the biggest problems they had in the whole investigation, there was not one crime lab in the world, not the United States, in the world, that could test evidence like that for bleach. Not one.
Not one.
No, never been done before.
So how?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, well, how did they end up doing it then? How did they end up finding her guilty of that?
They kept looking. They kept looking. They found one lab that said they may be able to configure their equipment to see. And you would never guess who it was in a million years. It was the FDA, Federal Drug Administration.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
they said, we may be able to configure our equipment so we can test it. And Lufkin PD had about 15 samples. So they sent 52 samples altogether. And mixed in with those were the 10 samples they had. And the FDA didn't know which ones they suspected or not. And they configured their equipment, and they ran it, and they got 10 hits. And every one of them was correct samples. It's a really complicated process that I didn't go into too much in the book, and because I really don't understand a lot of it.
Right.
You'd have to be a microbiology, chemistry guru to understand it, but somehow bleach it's not detectable, but it leaves trace markers somehow.
Right.
And that's how they were able to find it.
Wow. So what happens and how long was the trial?
The trial itself was 4 weeks. Voir dire, which is jury selection, was 3 weeks. And that was a long process.
Yeah.
They didn't do the jury selection like they normally do. They called each individual juror in to question them by themselves. And that's when it took 3 weeks. But the trial was 4 weeks.
So they convicted her of 5 murders.
5, yes.
So they could only prove 5, and
right.
And she attempted 5, but only got 3 of those.
Right.
So the ones she attempted, I guess, would be the ones that got more water than bleach, and they just got sick.
Right. That was right. 5 of them actually survived, and they the two women that saw the patients being injected, both patients were survived, and it basically depended. Of course, not everybody has the same illness, same level of sickness. Some of them are stronger than others. And if the stronger gets a lesser dose of bleach, then their chance of survival are better depending on how much bleach is actually there. And there's probably some others that survived that they just couldn't pin down because they just didn't have the evidence.
So did she have a defense other than she just said she was not guilty, but did she have any sort of defense to what they were saying?
Not really. She had two defense attorneys. One of them she paid, and one of them was furnished by the state. And the reason for that is, and this was a death penalty case, and the one they had hired, when they first charged her, let me back up. When they first charged her, she was charged with 2 counts of aggravated assault, which basically in Texas is attempted murder. But attempted murder is so hard to prove that it's aggravated assault. And that was on the 2 patients that the witnesses had seen her inject. They knew they had a really good case on those. And one was the DA here, of course, had never tried anything or come close to trying anything like this. Nobody else had either. But one thing he did find out, it is really difficult to take a medical expert to court and win. Most of the ones that get convicted, they get through confessions. It's really difficult to go to court and get a conviction. So he decided we're going to arrest her on these 2 charges of aggravated assault and see if we can get a confession. It didn't happen. And so when they arrested her there, she went out and got an attorney. But the attorney she got was not a death penalty specialist. And later on, they charged her with these murders and put the death penalty on the line. And when the death penalty got on the line, in Texas, you have to be represented. One of your attorneys has to be a death penalty specialist. And Lufkin has none. So they had to bring one in. And these 2 attorneys didn't get along at all. At all. One of the problems was, I think the biggest problem was that the state was paying this death penalty specialist. And the attorney from here had already got all the money he was going to get. And he couldn't get any more money while this death penalty specialist was continuously getting paid. The death penalty specialist looked at everything and said, you need to plead this. And her hired attorney told her, I can get you off. And of course, who do you listen to?
Well, yeah, you try to get off, I would guess.
Yeah, she listened to him, and she should have listened to the other one because he knew what he was talking about.
So she ended up getting convicted of the 5. So she got the death penalty, obviously.
No, actually, she didn't.
Oh,
she got life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus 60 years.
Well, why did that happen? I mean, if she killed 5 that they convicted her of.
Yeah.
So wouldn't
and
that?
This is Texas, who doesn't have a problem with putting people to death.
Yeah.
It's kind of a really convoluted way to go about this, but people think in Texas, even I even thought the jury is the one that sentences her to death. Actually, in Texas, that's not the case. It's the judge who sentences them to death. After the punishment phase, the jury is given a list of questions. And one of the questions is she a future danger to society? And they just convicted her of killing 5 people. So the obvious answer to that is she has to be. Yeah. But once the first part of the trial, where she was convicted, was conducted by her paid attorney from Lufkin. Once she was convicted, the death penalty specialist took over for the punishment phase. And one of the things that, and I'd never even thought about this myself, but he said, let's look at this future danger to society. She's been convicted. The least she can get, the least, is life in prison without the possibility of parole. So what's her society? Her society now is a prison cell. And you're not going to see her at Walmart or any, this. He went all through this. You're not going to see her at Walmart or any place else. She's going to leave prison. The least she can get is leave prison in a pine box. So that kind of blew out that whole thing about future danger to society and everything. The jury was tired.
Yeah.
And they got confused about, and the whole thing is kind of confusing. And I would sit here and try to explain it to you, but I'm still confused about it. If 10 or more jurors believe she's a future danger to society, they go on to the next question. And if they don't, then the judge issues life in prison without the possibility of parole. But they have to go on to the next question for the death, to actually give her the death penalty. And it was something like, it states something as a weirdly worded. It says 10 or more have to find this. Well, 10 of them found she was a future danger to society. So, and it was just all the legal things in there, and they said, well, do we go on or don't we? And they didn't know because there was 10 of them. And finally, the foreman looked at them and said, do we need to go on with this? And they, no. So they sent it back in. But they were confused.
That must have been pretty. Did the community get pretty terrified over that too, like with the nurse killing and all that?
Yeah, they did, and it was kind of hard to get. Nobody really believed this. That until after the trial, nobody really believed that she did it. It's just something that was so outrageous that nobody really believed that she did it until after the trial.
Oh, so
kind of scary too.
So people actually believed in her more.
Yeah, they did. They did.
Oh, that's not normal. People usually don't see the good side. What? You know what I mean? Because, you get this, and then on the media, she killed people and all that. You would think that they would be more like, God, she's a murderer and stuff, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but there was a lot of other things that went on that most people didn't know or didn't understand until they read my book. But she was out on bail.
Oh.
And, yeah. She was out on bail for 3 years or so before she went on trial.
Was she working at a hospital?
Well, she started to work, when she was first arrested, it was for the 2 charges. And one of the deals that she was let on bail on those 2 aggravated assault charges, that she was not to go anywhere near a medical facility, work, or anything else. So she, first thing she did is she went out and got her a job at a medical facility.
No, and
they didn't know her name, and she gave her husband and her husband's number as a reference for the job. and she was working until they came and arrested her for capital murder.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah. But she was walking around, and nobody really knew the reason. So, you kind of think, if she really killed 5 people, why did they let her out?
Yeah. That's just weird. Well, that's a really bizarre case.
It is.
Wow, that was kind of strange. So, what's next for you?
Well, right now, I'm in the process of writing a proposal for my next true crime. And the trial is coming up in August. And it's going to be a pretty big one, too. Of course, it's not going to be near as bizarre as that one. I don't think anything gets to be as bizarre as that one, but I think it's going to be a really good one. And I'm going to look at a trial on February the 1st that I may think about writing, and it's about a square dance murders.
Wow.
I kind of like the bizarre ones.
Yeah. Well, they're a little more interesting, lots of angles,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one I'm looking at right now has got all kinds of angles.
Well, that's excellent. Excellent. Well, now, what's your contact information for people if they have maybe a case they want you to read about or maybe write? Yeah.
Well, first of all, there's my website, and that is www.johnfoxjohnhome.com. www.johnfoxjohnhome.com. And, of course, everybody can find me on Facebook under John Foxjohn.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for taking your time. I know it's busy, and you probably have lots of things you're doing, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Bye.
The mission has been completed.
The end! By George, he's got it! It is the end! How dare you!
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
If you're lying to me, I'll be back.